exactly why I genuinely love and am excited to tell you about the Henson razor, the sponsor of this video. It's a double-edged safety razor, something we've known works expensive, wasteful, and rough on our skin. Henson's taken the timeless safety razor and refined it with the same engineering expertise they used to build parts for the Mars rover in
Most people still think you need to have an online business to be able to do this. So it's 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I'm here in the city of Aswan.
On April 25th, 1999, around 5 a.m., a considerable crowd began clustering around Beihai Park in central Beijing. No one carried a banner or megaphone. No one shouted slogans. It wasn't much out of the ordinary for one of China's largest parks in the heart of this metropolis. That is, until the group began moving westward, across Beihai Bridge toward Zhongnanai, the central government complex of the Chinese Communist Party. By 8 a.m., more than 20,000 had gathered on Fuyu Street in front of the general office of the State Council in a series of silent, orderly lines. Still, not a banner or sign in sight. It remained entirely unclear what the bizarre gathering was about. By now, Luo Gan, Party Secretary of Legal and Political Affairs, had no choice but to call Jiang Zemin, the General Secretary of the party and the country's highest authority. As Luo explained the situation, Jiang grew increasingly worried. Whoever was behind this, it was surely a protest, the first in the history of the People's Republic to occur at Zhongnanai and the largest in Beijing since the 1989 crisis, which still haunted Jiang. Comprehending the situation's severity, Jiang tersely ordered Luo to figure it out. So Luo tapped Zhu Rongji, China's premier, the country's second highest ranking official, to assist in bringing an end to the mysterious standoff. But Luo and Zhu's first move wasn't to call in security forces to break up the demonstration. Instead, they would negotiate. Upon meeting with Luo and Zhu, the gathering's leaders made their purpose clear. They were practitioners of a type of Qigong, or slow movement exercise, known as Falun Gong, and they demanded the release of fellow practitioners arrested during a demonstration days earlier in Tianjin, a nearby port city. Zhu and Luo were confused. They had heard of Falun Gong, but they'd known Qigong as merely a form of gentle exercise meant for the elderly. To mobilize so many people almost in an instant seemed an impossibility. More worrying, the 5 leaders present for the negotiations were employees of the Army's Chief of Staff Department, Beijing University, and the Ministries of Supervision, Railways, and Public Security, all crucially important institutions for the regime. Over 6 hours, Luo and Zhu ultimately diffused the situation by conceding to all the group's demands, promising to release the Tianjin practitioners, that the government had no quarrel with Qigong groups such as theirs, and that all present at Zhongnanai would be safe from prosecution. Beijing had caved. The crowd had won. And so they dispersed. But Zhu was only number 2. His promises were still subject to the approval of Jiang Zemin, and for Jiang, the whole thing was nothing short of a disaster. Later that night, he penned a letter to high party members chastising them for their lack of awareness and demanding answers. What was this group? How did they mobilize such numbers? And who was in charge? Almost nothing is known about what happened behind the party curtain between that day and June 7th, when Jiang convened a meeting of the Politburo Standing Committee and gave a speech which left no room for ambiguity. Quote, "The Central Committee team on Falun Gong shall take immediate actions to organize resources, track down the Falun Gong organizational structure throughout China, formulate a crackdown strategy, and be fully mobilized to break and wipe out Falun Gong. We shall not wage a war without preparations." His philosophy, since the day he took power in the 1989 crisis, had always been very simple. We do not negotiate with protesters. Around midnight, the morning of July 20th, 88 days after the unprecedented and mysterious gathering, the government finally issued its real response. Security forces across the country were dispatched to arrest Falun Gong leading members. Protests erupted in response. Within 2 days, the government formally announced the ban on the practice of Falun Gong. The war between Falun Gong and Beijing, still raging to this day, had begun. How did this happen? This video is actually a supercut of 2 older videos we're re-releasing now in this format because 1, the combination tells the full story better, and 2, because YouTube age-restricted and demonetized this, the first part, when it was first shared about 1.5 years ago due to just a few seconds of footage depicting Chinese police brutality toward peaceful protesters. Unfortunately, we have had to remove the footage YouTube found objectionable, despite its documentary and historical value. Now, if you do want to see this video as it was meant to be seen, you can, at Nebula, a creator-owned streaming platform that cultivates great storytelling rather than censoring it. Because without ads, Nebula doesn't need to satisfy corporate demands for the sanitation of tough stories, creating an environment where great, thoughtful stories can thrive. That freedom is a big reason why so many of our favorite creators call Nebula home, like Real Life Lore, Wendover, Tirzu, Neo, Internet Shaquille, and more, offering not just uncensored. In turn, new religious movements proliferated, each with their own blend of modern sensibilities and attachment to the past. Nothing, however, rivaled the explosive popularity of Qigong, a slow movement exercise that connected the health of the body with the health of the spirit.
To Deng's eyes, Qigong was, in a sense, an effort to modernize Chinese spirituality in a distinctively Chinese way. However, it wasn't just Chinese spirituality that was changing. Deng's social opening also meant a relaxation of political censorship. And that allowed people to speak about politics in ways that would have, just a few years earlier, resulted in arrest, disappearance, or murder by state forces. However, loosening censorship without any real democratic reform meant that China's starry-eyed youth